welcome back to my channel. Today I will be reviewing for you Independent People by Halldór Laxness. I have been fully immersed in this book for the past 2 weeks and I loved this novel so much. If you don't know, Halldór Laxness is the only Nobel laureate from Iceland, and this is his most popular book, Independent People. It was originally published in the early 1930s in 2 separate volumes, and if you were to directly translate the title, it would actually translate to Self-Reliance or Self-Reliant People. And if you're thinking, wow, this is kind of reminding me of like Emerson and Thoreau, you would not be entirely off, because the message, or at least the opinions of the main character, really reflect that kind of mentality. There were many times where I wanted to say, or at least to myself, that the main character Bjartur is kind of like an American libertarian, reflecting what I've read in American literature from the early 1900s. To begin, Laxness first introduces us to this land and says, you know, the Vikings were here, there are many Norse legends, and he kind of sets the tone with this almost Nordic folklore. And he tells us that this particular region, called Summer Houses, has been cursed by this saint, who's referred to as the Fiend of Kolum Kikli, and is haunted by the spirit of this woman called Gunvor. Now, the way I pictured Gunvor and the way it's sort of described, she's very reminiscent of like Baba Yaga. She's this woman who screeches and she demands some sort of payment, and she wants people to give her stones when they pass by her mountain. And our main character, Bjartur, does not want to believe in any of this, and he thinks it's all nonsense, and he refuses to give her stones, which sets up the tone for the novel, saying that this particular region is now haunted and it's under a curse, maybe because of what he's done or refused to do. But it just kind of sets up this sort of hybrid of like supernatural elements and folklore, but also kind of superstition present in smaller towns. So Bjartur's character is very complex, mainly because at one point you think he's the meanest and most simple man possible, and yet he has all of these layers to him in terms of his art and what he represents, and he stands by his values, which is kind of admirable despite how difficult it is. So Bjartur's main obsession in life is to be a free man. He wants to be independent, and he works on a farm, and he's trying to work his way to freedom, to have bought the land. He's worked for many years to even put down a sort of down payment for this farm, and his obsession with freedom takes him to really strange places. He refuses to borrow anything from anyone so long as he would feel like he owes them. He would always have to give them something in return to make sure that he doesn't owe anyone anything. But sometimes it puts members of his own family in danger. And the second thing he really cares about are his sheep. He has a bunch of sheep, and he just walks them and cares about them and counts them and names them. And if one of them goes missing, he will go to the end of the world just to find that one sheep. He's very fixated on these sheep. He's very set in his ways and very rigid as a person. And when he finally gets married, his wife is miserable. She doesn't like the land. She can't even afford to throw stones to this Gunvor spirit because he won't let her. She's the opposite of free because she's catering to all of his values and his beliefs, and he has taken those rights away from her in the process. But it also shows us how difficult it is to be an independent person when society is doing something else entirely, when the economy runs on something else completely different. In this case, basically a lot of materialism and capitalism, and how difficult it is to stay an independent person, even working the land yourself, and how limited your resources are, because he can only farm and have so many sheep, but the moment he wants something new, he now has to owe someone something. He has to enter this sort of bartering economic system, and it's very difficult for him to stay afloat. Now, the novel really picks up once he has a daughter, and his daughter is kind of the opposite of him. And he loves his daughter very much, but the two kind of butt heads a lot. And that's when it sort of picks up, and it takes you through World War I as well. I don't even know what to make of this novel because there's so many layers. The first one is that Bjartur is also a poet. He likes to sing the sagas. He walks the moors and sings all of the old sagas every day, all the time. So in a sense, he's sort of a man of the arts and a bard in a very old school kind of way. His youngest son has this kind of connection to the mythological other realm. If you're not familiar, Icelandic have a very particular kind of mythology about the Huldufólk, or the hidden people, and they're kind of like little people who live in the mountains, and they're always up to no good, and sometimes they're held responsible for children missing or for other things, and there's a whole mythos around them. And his youngest son is very connected to them, and he can hear them. He has his whole other world going on his own. And the third thing, which I really loved, was kind of the description of the land and the moors. The moors were described to me in a way that I've only encountered in Wuthering Heights before, where you just have open land and mountains and man being left at the mercy of the elements. In many ways, it was kind of a form of nature writing, layering the sort of mythology and folklore with the sagas and superstitions, as well as describing you this land and taking you through the struggles of trying to remain strong and independent when you cannot, but doing this in a very slow and patient way. Now keep in mind, I haven't really spoiled anything because the plot is kind of what Bjartur does on a daily basis, but also what his family ends up doing and how he treats them and talks to them. It's not plot heavy, even though it kind of picks up halfway through the novel, but it's more like the various elements working together in this novel that make it outstanding, and the language used. I mean, I think it was a wonderful translation. Obviously, I have no idea if it is a good translation or if there will ever be a better one out there. But for me, like, the language was superb, given what I've read. I loved it. I cannot emphasize how much I love this novel. I really hope you read it, and I am certainly adding more Laxness to my 2020 year, that's for sure. Please let me know if you've read this or if you've heard of it, and if you have, what did you hear and what do you think? So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!